Morning, everyone. I'm Jambo. Welcome to the FIDA-Kenya Data webinar. We will discuss matters election as we gear up to the 2022 general election. My name is Ibc Ready, Program Officer, FIDA-Kenya. Our sign language interpreter at the bottom of the screen is Ibc Ready. Karibuni sana, welcome. We hope for good engagement in our online participants who are streaming and watching live. A bit of introduction about this webinar. Like I said, we're speaking about the elections. In 2022, we are going to the third cycle of general elections, post-2010 constitution. As FIDA-Kenya, we have been consistently advocating for gender equality, peaceful, free and fair elections since 2010 constitution. We will discuss how this is going on, discuss matters of two-part gender, which is a sticking issue as we go to the general election. What does it portend for us as Kenyans, as institutional support groups, communities all over the country, and as stakeholders? What is it we can do about this issue of ensuring that we vote women into political participation, into political seats, and ensuring that indeed they participate in political systems. Now, FIDA-Kenya launched in August the Voter Data campaign, which is part of this that we are discussing today. And with us, we have the element of every sector that will be involved in the elections. We have the disability, we have the youth, we have the women, and we have the sector holders, the electoral management processes. Now, our panelists for today, we have Marcus Ola, who comes from the ILOG. ILOG is an observer group in Kenya, and he's the senior program manager for ILOG. ILOG is well versed in matters of elections, and they have been observing elections for quite a while, and we hope we'll get insights from them. Our second panelist will be Raya Kamau, who comes all the way from, streaming all the way from Lamu. She's the executive director of Lamu Women Alliance, one of our biggest community-based organization leaders, who has been with the grassroots for quite a while and should be giving us a perspective on citizen engagement in terms of electoral elections. Our third panelist is Ms. President Pastor, Nerea Akech, all the way from Omabay. She's the MCA. She's an MCA. Her perspective, especially being an incumbent MCA, will be quite enriching for this webinar, as we hope to bridge the gaps in terms of youth participation, women participation. Our four panelists will be Jane Kibugi. Jane Kibugi is the executive director, Women Challenge. She'll be giving us the perspective of persons with disabilities and how they engage in elections, especially the women with disabilities. These panelists have been selected through a process where we felt that the representation of Kenya is not mainly just in the group, and each corner of the country will have a voice in this webinar. Welcome, panelists. We've been working on matters of elections since the formation of FIDA. However, the focus for today is since 2010, what has been going on in matters of elections. So I will start with ILOG. It's public knowledge that IEBC has been doing the voter registration exercise since the 15th of October, since the 4th of October this month. The process will go on until the end of the month, and the IBC has indicated that this is not, this process will be just a one-off. They have no resources to do another process of voter registration. Now, IBC has a target for this exercise, and they have put a weekly target of 1.5 million. We've been seeing in the press indications that the targets per week have not been reached. And it's something of concern, especially being an observer group, ALOG. We are here to discuss first, do you think that IEBC, before the conduct of this voter registration process, do you think it did adequate voter education to ensure that the targets that they are looking into are reached? That will be the question for you. And then IEBC in 2017 reported that there was insufficient voter education that led, voter and civic education that led to voter apathy. And indeed, it's one of the things that they have hoped to counter come 2022. Also, the voter registry was not open for scrutiny in the 2017 elections. Do you think that registry will be an issue in the coming general election? And is it something that will be countered during the voter registration process that is ongoing? And then third, is IEBC ready for the elections? Is it ready for these coming elections in terms of resourcing, in terms of manpower, in terms of capacity? We know that it's properly constituted currently. However, there have been questions of how the Secretariat will manage its role come 2022 elections because it's not fully constituted per se. Over to you, Mule. Marcus.
Thank you very much, Sophie. This is a very important discussion we're having today. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, very well. In terms of the first point of discussion, whether IEBC has adequately conducted civic education to ensure that their weekly target is reached, the simple answer is no. We believe that the IEBC has not done sufficient voter education to ensure that not only are Kenyans aware that there is a process that is currently taking place, but also to be motivated to come out to vote. And I'm speaking like this because ELOG has deployed 290 long-term observers, one in each of the constituencies. And part of the information we have been collecting is some of the IEBC operations that are going on. And you'll understand why some of these issues are the way they are. First, the IEBC had requested about 4 billion shillings to allow it not only prepare for the voter registration exercise, but also to actually conduct the same process. We are aware that the commission was only given less than a half of the money that are requested for. And that is, they were only given 1.2 billion shillings. Now, one would sympathize with the commission that some of these things we are asking IEBC to do, they require resources. And when you are given less than half of your budget, you can't do much. So, I mean, we understand, at least as an observation group, while we think and know and appreciate that the commission is underfunded generally, but also specifically in terms of voter registration. And remember, they are calling this an enhanced continuous voter registration process. It is not a mass voter registration. And you'll also remember that every ward has got only 3 kits that moves around. So, the commission is handicapped, as it were, and hence the problem of insufficient voter education. In fact, our records show that the voter education initiatives have been less than 20% in terms of coverage countrywide. So that's a big issue that we must address moving forward. The second issue I would like to speak to, Sophie, is that the work of voter education is not exclusively vested in the Commission. The law recognizes that IBC should also partner with other bodies, other institutions, other civil society organizations to be able to carry out voter education initiatives. So perhaps the call here would be to ask and request other CSOs to move in and assist the Commission in terms of voter education initiative. The other thing I wanted to speak to is, since a majority of those that are being targeted are the youth, we need to speak to what we call the targeted voter education and sensitization initiatives. We know that a majority of our population is the youth. And I want to just tell you something, that in the 2017 process, the youth that were eligible to vote were 45%. And out of the 25 million that the IBC was targeting, 45% of that number was supposed to be the youth. However, out of that exercise, only 0.6% of the youth registered in that election, which was a big problem in terms of moving the process forward. So we made a recommendation that the local registration work in terms of voter-friendly outreach programs, such as interactive online tools such as Facebook, Twitter, blogs, use of infotainment and containment and edutainment. Those two terms are important. The blogs to use what we call the infotainment and edutainment voter education strategy. So the call is that we are in the second week of the process. A lot can still be done. And since we are targeting the youth, these targeted campaigns should make use of the interactive digital tools, and especially the online tools. Yeah. So Sophie, I don't know whether I should continue to the next element or I stop it from there. You can advise.
Thank you, Marcus. I have two questions out of that brief. Thank you for the data on youth that were targeted 45%, and then against 0.3%. That was a huge
0.8.
That is a huge number that was lost in that exercise. Now, as we talk about infotainment and technology, use of technology to reach the youth, in the last general elections, technology was a factor that was litigated upon in the Supreme Court, and it's something that was brought out as something we have a weakness in. Now, if we talk about use of technology to reach the youth, do you think the capacity is there anyway for the IEBC to get to that threshold in terms of technological infrastructure and resources, and in fact, manpower? How can we get there? And as you answer that, we have notification that government stated that as much as we, civil society and other partners would like to support IBC in breaching its gaps in terms of resources, it was indicated that no amount of money can be directed to IBC for elections. Kenya said they are well and capable to finance their own elections. Now, what do we do now that there is such a directive?
Thank you, Sophie. Let me start with the last question. We are aware that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs wrote to our development partners, requesting them, if you will, that no direct funding will be given to the Commission. in terms of election. But let us appreciate this fact that it is the responsibility of a government to finance its institutions, and especially the elections. Some of these development partners, the money they're giving us belongs to their own taxpayers. So, I mean, on the one hand, it is the responsibility of the government to ensure that the monies are availed to the IEBC and other electoral institutions. That must be appreciated. However, we also know that the IEBC had asked for about 40 billion shillings towards the 2022 election. They were going to receive less than half of that amount of money. And case in point, now we speak about the enhanced continuous voter registration, where they're asked for 4 billion shillings, they've only been given 1.2 billion shillings. Now the question is, where does the commission get that extra amount of money, which is about 2.2 billion? It's a big deficit. So the question is, if you don't want to fund, if you don't want other partners to come on board to assist the commission, where will they get the money to be able to conduct these other things? As we said, even the use of technology. If, for instance, the commission are to target the youth and use digital tools to reach out to the youth, either on Twitter, Facebook, because those things also require money, they require expertise. Where would they get the money to do it? So we are unfortunately setting up the commission for failure. We are setting the commission to fail because we are making it hard for them to work. Now, to the question of, and this takes me to my second point. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs did not stop the development partners from giving support to CSOs. So nothing stops, because remember, the law provides that IEBC may partner with other bodies to be able to conduct the voter education, whichever form they will take. So again, we can use this occasion of this meeting to call upon the not only our development partners to fund and support some of the voter education initiatives by the civil society organizations, but also to call upon the commission to reach out to the local community-based organizations, reach out to the youth-based organizations to be able to conduct and mobilize youth to come and vote.
Thank you very much, Marcus. On the matter of technology, what do you think? Are we too far off? Because the youth, like you said, the youth population needs to be captured. And technology was an issue that was discussed in the last general elections. Are we far off? Can we get to the point where technology is something that works for us?
I would say this, Sophie, that if you remember, the level of mistrust in this country is appalling. We don't trust institutions, we don't trust ourselves, and therefore we think that when it comes to elections, actually, we trust M-Pesa agents, that when you go to an M-Pesa shop, you give your money, it is deposited on your phone, and you can send it, and then the person receives the money. But we don't trust our technology when it comes to elections. And remember, even in the Supreme Court, the major issue was about technology. Open the server, don't open the server. That was a major issue. I think we employed the use of technology not only for efficiency sake, but also to address the questions that come as a result of mistrust. We don't trust you to count our votes. We don't trust you to relay the exact and the correct result to the tallying center. So let us use technology that you may not interfere with. I think moving from lessons learned from 2017, I think we are better. I mean, we are making progress, and I keep on telling people that compared with the 2013 election, 2017 was better run election in terms of technology, in terms of management of e-day processes, in terms of management of result transmission by the IEBC, it was better managed than 2013. However, it was also the only election that was nullified for the president. So you see the paradox. On the one hand, it is better managed in terms of the processes and even the technology that was employed. There was a massive failure, as we saw in 2013. However, at the same time, it was the only election that was nullified. But to be direct to your question, Sophie, and the rest of our team here, I think we have a long way to go. We can use technology better than we did before by involving a number of stakeholders so that they understand the process. Even the procurement of that technology should be made public. Use and training the public to understand the use of technology, what it's able to do, should also be done much more earlier to avoid mistrust of a number of processes, including technology.
Thank you, Marcus. The issue of mistrust is something that the Constitution hoped to counter through the varied reforms that were put in place, including the institution of Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. However, as we all know, that has been a journey that has had its own hurdles. Now, since we've departed on the issue of the youth and technology, I'll bring in Raya from Lamu. Raya, kwa sababu kuna voter registration process that is ongoing. Waonaje watu wa Lamu, youth, persons with disability, wanawake, are they participating in the voter registration process in the coastal region? And do you think the 2/3 gender rule is a factor that they would consider? Being a person who's been on the grassroots, wewe ni ule mama wa pale vijijini, do you think it is something they consider as an issue they would vote for or against? Karibu.
Asante sana dadangu Sophie na wenzangu wote ambao tumehudhuria kongamano hili. Nimechagua kuongea Kiswahili kwa sababu watu wengi hapa Lamu wanataka kusikia ndio waelewe. Kwa hivyo wacha niseme hivi. Hivi sasa kuna process hii ni ya watu kwenda kujiandikisha either upya, kwenda kubadilisha wale ambao wanataka kadi zao za kura, kufanya transfer, na wengine pia ni kwenda kuangalia particulars kama pale ulivyoandikishwa. Je, particulars zako ziko sawa sawa? Kwa sababu haya ni makosa ambayo huwa yanatokea wakati wa kupiga kura. Na pia je, uko kwenye daftari ya kupigia kura? Uko kwenye the registration inspection, register? Kwa sababu wakati mwingine watu wanaenda wanajiandikisha na siku ya kura kenda anaambiwa haonekani. Kwa hivyo huu ni wakati mwafaka kama bado wameandikishwa. Mimi nikisema hapa Lamu, watu wengi wamerelate kujiandikisha na wanasiasa. Wanaona si haki yao ya kikatiba, ni haki ya wanasiasa. Kwa hivyo mara nyingi wanangojea kwanza wanasiasa wawapangie, kwa sababu ni lazima watu wasafirishwe. Nimefurahi kuona safari hii commission imesema si lazima mtu aende mashinani kujiandikisha kura. Kama sehemu yoyote ambayo wewe uko unaweza kwenda na vitambulisho vako na ukaandikishwa. Lakini mbeleni ilikuwa lazima usafiri uje. So hizi zote walikuwa wana facilitate ni wanasiasa. Kwa hivyo hata hivi sasa huku Lamu wengi wanasubiri kusafirishwa, kwa sababu wakati wakisafirishwa wanapawa pesa za usafiri, wanapawa pesa za accommodation na za matumizi. Naam, Sophie.
Asante. Now that you've brought up the issue of commercialization, kupeana pesa ndio watu wachukue kura. Sasa, has that been the case in this particular voter registration process? Ama unaonaje watu huko kwa kijijini wanasema wapewe pesa ndio wachukue kura, Na kama organization ya Lamu Women Alliance, kuna vyovyote mnavyofanya kuhakikisha watu ambao hawajakuchukua kura yao wanaenda pale kuchukua kura, especially wanawake wale wanataka kuparticipate kwa elections ya next year?
Aya, sasa hayo ni mambo mawili tofauti. Kuna moja, hiyo ni kuhamasisha watu waende kukata kadi zao za kura, na sisi kama shirika la Lamu Women Alliance tumekuwa tukifanya mikutano mingi ya kuhamasisha jamii. Hata kipindi hichi cha nyuma kama wiki mbili hivi, kuna shirika lingine linaitwa IOM, International Organization of Migration, ili tuchukua sisi kama walimu kwenda kufundisha vijana, wamama na religious leader kwa jamii umuhimu wa watu kukata kura na umuhimu wa kwenda kupiga kura. Kwa upande wa uwakilishi wa kina mama hapa Lamu, kwa sababu ya dini na kwa sababu ya utamaduni, si wamama wengi ambao wana engage kwa mambo ya siasa. Kwa hivyo sisi mara nyingi huwa ni participants to spectators kwenye siasa, lakini kucheza mchezo wenyewe si sana, kwa sababu kwa mfano nikikueleza hivi sasa katika viti 6 vote vilivyochaguliwa vya kisiasa, tuko na mama mmoja tu ambao nafasi ni ile ya women rep. Na ni kwa sababu gani tumepata nafasi hiyo? Kwa sababu katiba imeweka ni lazima, lakini zilizobakia zote zimeshikiliwa na wanaume. Kwenye MCA tuko na wodi 10, kiti kimoja tu mama mmoja alibahatika akachaguliwa, ni elected MCA. Viti 9 vilivyobakia vote vilichukuliwa na wanaume. Kwa hivyo kwa upande wa uwakilishi wa wanawake bado tuko nyuma, na mimi nimefurahi kama FIDA kuleta kampeni hii ya Vota Dada ili tuweze kuhamasisha wanawake wa actively involve themselves kwa mambo ya kura, kujiandikisha, kusimama na kuhamasisha watu waweze kuingia kwa mambo ya siasa wengi. Asante.
Asante Raya. Mwenzetu Marcus wa ILOG alisema kwa kila ward kuna zile vifaa vitatu ambavyo vinatembea zikiregister watu kuvote. Unaweza tuambia kama pale Lamu umeziona, kama hiyo inatendeka ama kuna gap mahali?
Nimeziona, lakini sasa hivyo ni changamoto, kwa sababu tungependelea kama ingekuwa kila kituo kiko na karani, lakini kama hivyo unajua watu wanaweza jipanga leo waende pahali na kumbe ule karani ameenda sehemu zingine, na watu wetu wako na mashughuli mingi. Akienda siku moja akimkosa yule hata rudi tena, ataangalia shughuli zake nyingine. Na hii ni exercise ambayo ina muda, imewekwa muda maalum. Zikimalizika hizi siku hawataweza tena ku-access. Kwa hivyo nimeona pia kuna changamoto hiyo Lamu. Na changamoto nyingine ni habari ya civic education. Commission ya IBC haijafanya matayarisho kabambe kuelezea watu kwanza umuhimu wa zoezi hili. Wanafaa wa invest pesa nyingi kwa kufanya civic education. You know, civic education should be an ongoing process. Sio tusubiri mpaka kura inakaribia wanasiasa wa influence ndio mwanze civic education. Inafaa iwe ni ongoing, wanafanya mpaka watu waelewe umuhimu wa yeye kupiga kura. Asante.
Asante. Haya, sasa tusonge kwa persons with disability. Tunajua constitution, we know that the constitution is emphatic on inclusivity. The inclusivity bit includes people with disability, the marginalized communities. All are given an equal opportunity to participate in electoral governance. Now, the statistics that have shown that women with disability in public and private sector is really scanty in Kenya. And moving on, we are 11 years into the constitution. And this factor is still an issue for us as we go into elections. In the last 2 elections, the numbers of persons with disability who were elected into parliament were very minimal. In fact, they had to do a lot more to increase the numbers during the nomination process from the political parties. So the players in this sector, political parties, the IEBC, and the CSOs that advocate for inclusivity, they are all major players to ensure that we get the gap in ensuring there is proper inclusivity all around the country. Now, in that regard, we've been partnering with Women Challenge to ensure that inclusivity is part of the programming that we do at FIDA. Now, with us here, Jane, maybe you can shed a bit of light. I know you've been working currently on policies on PWDs, and we want to know whether the electoral institutions that include political parties are doing enough to ensure that women with disabilities participate in elections and leadership. You can even touch on whether the current voter registration process is disability friendly. Thank you. Jane?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sophie?
Yes, go on, we can hear you.
Okay, I was saying thank you so much for this webinar and this opportunity for us to discuss ways to increase participation of women and with the disabilities. I would start from where you said, is there much enough that is being done by electoral bodies to ensure that we increase the participation of women with disabilities? The answer is no. And given the statistics that you have read, since 2017, election that was conducted then, we dropped from the 2013, the number of women with disabilities, or in general, including men with disabilities. Why? Because 17 counties did not nominate any person with a disability in their county assemblies. 8 of them had 1 person. So you can see that difference. While in 2013, we had only 3 that had not nominated anybody with a disability. So therefore, if we are not careful on how we follow the law, then we are going to phase out the representation of persons with disabilities, as much as it is their right to have that public spaces, to air their views through the electoral bodies. So really, IBC has to show us and come out clearly to show us that they are ensuring participation of persons with disabilities, and more so the women with disabilities. And as WCC, we have that project Sophie have talked about that we are working together to ensure that we have bigger number of women with disabilities come 2022. So how are we doing it? We are going around the country educating women with disabilities in a small way, providing that civic education to them, that it is their right to register as voters, to give in to be elected, not only to vote, but also they can be voted for, not only to wait for nominations, but they can seek the elective positions. Although there are so many barriers that we need to, that we face when we do that. So, and not only IBC, even the political spheres, the leaders that are going around doing their campaign. I've not seen anybody, if I've not been listening carefully in the news, any political leader encouraging Kenyans to go and register as voters. They're only talking so much about their promises, how they want to run Kenya in the next 5 years after 2022. But little is being said on voters' education. We are not encouraging people to go and vote. So really, IBC, other electoral bodies need to come out and ensure that we have everybody on board. 2017, during the voters registration, we had IBC had developed inclusivity in a way that the form that you are going to register as a voter, you state your disability and what are the needs that you need during voting maybe. I've not visited any any registration point to ensure that whether that is there, but I want to imagine it is still there, that they're capturing the needs of persons with disabilities, the needs of women with disabilities. as we move forward. So I would say really nothing much has been done. And we saw the elections of presidential elections 2017 being nullified. I would also hoping to see a situation where persons with disabilities will move forward to call IBC to nullify the whole election if we will not have enough representation of persons with disabilities, because we violate the law so much when it comes to the sector. Sophie.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Jane. I'm glad you touched on that bit on that IBC in the previous voter registration process had requested that people indicate, they capture the data and statistics on the disabilities and how IBC can facilitate their civic duties when it comes to elections. Maybe ELOG will confirm whether that is the case currently, and maybe a follow-up to that particular information. You can let us know whether during the elections, IBC indeed provided sufficient facilitation to ensure that people with disabilities actually went and exercised their civic duties and elected the people of their choice. As you answer that, maybe you can touch a little bit on the election campaign financing bill. If you, as an organization, did you have a chance to look at it and see whether PWDs were catered for in that bill in terms of resource allocation to campaign for elections?
Yes, Sophie. 2017 election ensured that people with disabilities really accessed voting stations, polling stations, and centers, but not everywhere. But where it was not possible for them to enter, the returning officers would come out and ensure that one has voted. So that was well done. But again, for those who could use Braille, the Braille materials were produced by IBC, but they were never availed at the polling stations. Again, you wonder why waste all the resources by doing all that, and then it is not even available for the people who needs that. So we want to see more being done in 2027, 2022, and yes, we thank IBC for that. 2017, quite a number of people with disabilities were able to vote a candidate of their choice, because they were even allowed to go with assistance of their choice. You know, the people we trust who could walk with us into the polling station and vote for us. I mean, tick the ballot paper for us. We had even companies offering free transport for persons with disabilities, like Safaricom, Uber. They did that quite a lot, and we are thankful for that. Talking a bit on the financing bill, political financing bill, really, have I looked at it? I would say I've not looked at it, but that is a failure on my side or in our side. But I would want to imagine it is clearly stating how they are going to finance persons with disabilities, because today it is left to the political party for them to subsidize the fee they pay to the political parties and the rest. But not all the political parties will waive. Some were waiving 2017, completely waiving. Others mean subsidized. But we want to see a situation where the political party organization, as an organization or IEBC, financing persons with disabilities during their campaigns activities.
Thank you, Jane. Coming back to the polling stations, were they disability friendly in 2017? And do you see that the fact that there is a roving voter registration process in the ward level, is it going to capture more people with disability, since that provision is more mobile than previously?
That should be the picture, Sophie, that we see more people with disabilities being able to access polling stations. As I have said, not all the polling stations work. For example, I was a supervisor, is it a supervisor? No, an observer in one of the polling stations. And it was upstairs, even for me going up. I have a physical disability, and going up, I had also some difficulties. But if we had any voter with the disability coming to that station, then they would have faced that barrier. So we want to see more of that I mean, IBC doing much more. I don't know what they'll do because of the register, because if my name is in the register that is upstairs, what they do, and that's what I was saying, the officials were kind enough to come down and ensure that that person has voted adequately. So as to what they did with the ballot papers, I mean boxes, I don't know whether they carried all the boxes down for them to facilitate that, but where I was, in the station where I was, I did not see any person with disabilities, but I want to imagine they were elsewhere. So really, we want to see more and more being done to ensure that we vote freely, independently, and because it is our right. It is a right for everyone, for every Kenyan to vote.
Thank you very much. That is quite a concern. Everyone should be given the opportunity to participate in elections. Now, coming to our Miss President, who is an incumbent MCA. She's experienced women in leadership and in elections and in governance as a member of County Assembly of Homa Bay. Now, Ms. Nerea, you are well aware that we are far from reaching the 2/3 gender rule. And each year it is becoming harder and harder to actually legislate on this matter, which we were given reprieve by the court since 2013 in terms of progressive realization. Now, if the buying for female aspirants buying for political seats in any elections has been documented by our gender audit as a big challenge. It portends various challenges that tip the scales in favor of the male counterparts. So what challenges did you experience that you would advise the audience on how to mitigate upon them when it comes to the actual nomination process and the election day, as someone who is a sitting member of County Assembly? Maybe you can begin with that as we pick up the discussions on the nitty-gritties of elections.
I mean, I keep saying that, you know, first of all, any woman or even man that makes a decision and announces that they are vying for a political seat is brave. I mean, so it really knows no gender, because the difficulties, you know, they transcend, you know, the gender divide, so to speak, you know. But essentially, when you look at, you know, being elected into offices, it's a privilege that comes from democracy. And when we look at democracy needs to have open and fair play. And so essentially the reason why, you know, we say a lot of women with disability, a lot of young people and women in general, or even minority tribes have been left behind, is because, you know, they did not, number one, have, you know, the right information, the right support, and the right institutional resources to access the electoral process. And so we have a lot of buzzwords that are going out there. They're talking about inclusive elections. But you cannot have an inclusive electoral outcome if you do not have an inclusive electoral process. So it begins from the process itself. And so number one, we are saying that now we have IEBC saying that we have this window of 1 month to register people to be voters. For you to be a voter, first of all, you must have acquired a national identification card. And so when we are giving these two messages at the same time and saying that you need to, you know, you need to get your ID and of course be registered as a voter, if we did not start with that ID registration, then we totally missed an inclusive process right there. So the young people are being targeted, significant numbers. When I looked at, IEBC targets for 2022, Rift Valley having the highest of about 3.4 million, followed by about Eastern that has 1.4, Western, Nyanza, Central, all of them are somewhere just under a million, new voters being targeted. And we know young people are the biggest targets. So I prefer to work with the data because that is the only way to get an inclusive process, which will give us the 2/3 gender rule that we are looking for. How many of our young people are male, female, and what do they subscribe to? Because I don't believe leadership has anything to do with gender, not at all. I believe that everybody needs to go out there and fight and be able to convince the voters that, yes, they are the best. Of course, this electoral process has been skewed, against people who, number one, cannot participate in violence, and number two, cannot have, the resources to, quote unquote, whitewash, all the other, candidates. And so all through the previous election cycles, we've gone through a scenario where we have, men who have more resources. Then we have a woman who has, better leadership talent, but fewer resources. So then how do you go about it? I mean, what I always believe in, if you see a woman vying, chances are very high that she will have men behind her, because then she will have taken time to convince, other males and young people that she has the leadership talent. And so that is what we go for. And so number two, I want to go to political parties, because I think that is where the answer is. Yes, we went to parliament and you could see that even all the political parties coming in, the dynamics in parliament were different. People were given money, even women were given money to go out of the country. So they were not available to vote for the bill the last time. So I still take it back to political parties. And I'm not afraid to say this. My party leader, Raila Amolo Odinga, had been a champion of how, getting this 2/3 gender rule met. And he went out there and risked it all and said, I'm proposing that we have BBI that will reserve these seats, that will talk about, women being in the gubernatorial tickets, women being MPs, women being MCAs. So that was a clear agenda that was supposed to have handled the women. And yes, I will say that we respect the court's decision and look at it again and figure out how do political parties come in, because the goodwill seemed to have been there last year. So then my suggested way forward, political parties understand the dynamics of their strongholds very well, better than IEBC, I dare say. So it means that if you're a political party leader that knows that you have a commitment to the 2/3 gender rule, then it follows that you have been working with the Women League of your political party up to this point to make sure that you know how many of your candidate or aspirants you have, or potential aspirants, because not everybody has come in. How many of them are women? How many of them are good? How are you involving them in party structures, in party activities, for them to get visibility, so that even when they get to the electorate will look at them and say, this person has a record of serving alongside other party structures. This is somebody that we can trust to deliver the ideology that is taking us to where we need to go to. So it's a difficult thing to do, and it means that somebody will subconsciously be choosing a leader of the female gender, not a female leader. I think we get lost there. And a lot of the language and communication around the 2/3 gender rule is where we miss the mark. Because if you stop a man somewhere, I can tell you, I stop 10 men, 8 of them will tell me, hii maneno ya gender ni ya wamama. So I think the communication really missed the mark, because gender is either way. Because what happens when we elect more women and then the men have to, seek out ways of now being empowered to, to also serve alongside. So I keep saying, just as we are in our homes, just as we are in our friendships, where we have different genders bringing in different qualities and balancing each other out, that is the conversation we need to have. And it's not supposed to be, am I supposed to be better than the man, or is the man supposed to be better than me, when we both present our candidature. I think we need to look at it from a very objective point of view, because if we full on go out and say that, vote Adada, essentially it will be a fight and men will say, okay, they want to replace us, but it's not a replacement. So even as we say we are voting Adada, we are telling the men, vote Adada for this reason, not just vote Adada, because it needs to be driven by the men. So the male involvement for me should be important. So they should be looking at women as their dada and not looking at women as the dada of the dada. So that's the kind of thing that we talk about. 2017, we ended up with about 23% of women in elective office, and then about 3 governors and 3 senators. Now we are looking at getting more. So it's the way we structure how we speak. It's the way the women who are in leadership now are delivering their mandate. So substantive women representation, it's the way they do that that will convince the electorate in general to be able to give a chance to other women. And when I go out to campaign, I've nowadays become too conscious. I really do not want to campaign and say that the first thing I want to do is to bring water so that women don't have to trek a long distance. I would rather the men say that rather than me as the woman. I would rather have, start with, how do I empower the businessmen regardless of gender, so that then we can balance out the household income. So it is very important that we speak about these things genuinely, openly. But if we lock ourselves in that corner of saying that gender, and yet we know people are missing the point of the 2/3 gender rule, we are going to have a problem. So the other thing that, as I conclude, is the issue of violence. We know that, perpetration of violence knows no gender, but history, has led us to believe that the males are the perpetrators of violence. In fact, when you have a woman who is a strong contender for a seat and has security to protect her, most often she will be looked at as violent, and the electorate will think that she is not different from the women that they are used to, because the electorate doesn't want to be intimidated by your demeanor, intimidated by your strength. So as we go out and campaign, because elections past are gone, we are not going to look at them and say that, things will be the same. We are already in election mode. So anything that happened, the numbers that happened last time, those are gone. The only thing we have now is the fact that, number one, we lost an opportunity through BBI to meet the 2/3 gender rule. That we lost it. And that because we have to respect the law. And number two, we know that there is another opportunity for women to build their movement once again, and then go into the different political vehicles that exist, so that we can get the women in from whichever party, so that this movement is working, whether someone is in ODM, is in Jubilee, is in ANC, is in FIDA-Kenya. Are we going to get ANC leaders who are female elected in their stronghold? And I think this conversation that FIDA has now, Vote Adada, is supposed to transcend and go across the divide, because that is where you need to get the strength. Get the numbers, look at data of the women who can hack it, and look at how to resource them. We keep focusing on so many of the trainings. We have a lot of trainings that are targeting women, but I say, and I dare say, that we are putting money in the wrong places. We need that money to go into the communities. We need these women to be resourced so that they have been trained. We need them to be resourced to have the people volunteering in their campaigns, to have campaign material, to have the logistical arrangements for them to be able to penetrate the ground. I can go to a ward, I can go to a constituency and sit and convince the voters. But if I do not have the resources to do that, then I will still keep crying and say, women did not meet the 2/3 gender rule. Put your resources where it's supposed to go, because we have a year less than a year to the general election, and yet we, because of COVID and other factors, we do not have the resources coming in where they are targeted the best to be able to deliver women to parliament, to county assemblies, to Senate, and to the Council of Governors. Thank you.
Thank you. You've talked passionately about how political parties have structures through the women, you've called it what? Women leagues in political parties. Now, we've seen from data and statistics from the previous elections that as much as women are participating in political parties processes through their own political parties, when it comes to the nomination process, then things change. You know, it has been documented that in certain instances, party primaries are usually chaotic. Now, when it comes to the issuance of those party certificates that will ensure that you have your say and your name at the ballot box, then the issue of resourcing comes in. Here, as we well know, being a patriarchal society, men have the more financial muscle to purchase the political parties' certificates and run with it to the IBC and get themselves at the ballot box. I know that political parties may deny, however, those are the part of the disputes that have been being solved into the 2017 political parties dispute tribunal. It was the highest number of cases. Now, as much as you say that the political parties' women's league is doing a good job, is it a systematic way of ensuring that those women who participate in the political processes for the last 5 years, going to 2022, will get an opportunity to have their voice heard and the electorate have a chance for voting them into office? As you answer that, maybe you can touch on whether ILOG has said that women are through the statistics that they have presented, they are the majority of persons who are registered as voters. But when it comes to elections, as has been indicated by IEBC, they are not there. Where are they? What is happening?
Now, one thing, I do believe that when you have an active, women league in a political party, then within your strongholds, you can still push the party nomination dynamics that will favor women. And the one thing that I'm confident about, even with my political party, ODM, is that it's negotiation, it's bargaining, because 2017 and 2022 are certainly different. We are riding on the goodwill that our party had to be able to bridge that gender divide. And I think it's the goodwill that we are banking on and counting on to realize that it's important. But even with that goodwill, I can tell you for free that you do not sit back as a woman who is interested and you start lobbying in the background, thinking that the patriarchy within leadership structures will be able to get you the ticket without you fighting. I think it's important for women, for example, go out and participate, be visible, be somebody whose name is recognizable, because it would be easier in strongholds, for example, to be given a ticket if your name is recognizable and we can attribute you to something that that they are proud of as a community. Or if you are somebody who has a character and you can go out, even during party elections and by-elections, you saw very well, what happened in Matungu, what happened in Sambweni, and then what happened in Bonchari. If you look at those and the women that went out, to fight for their political space, then it means that then, number one, you get the attention of the party leadership, so that you make your bargaining easier, because number one, even if somebody comes with the money and everything, but they don't carry political clout within the party, then they will not succeed. And trust me, in strongholds, once you have a party ticket issued, it means that you're working to secure only 50%. And so it is your work. And that's why I'm saying it is not about gender. Then the number two issue, we have majority women in terms of population, about 51 to 52%. That is there, and we agree and we accept. But look at the dynamics. You have a good percentage of women, like myself, who got married before they attained the age of majority. And that means some of them, when you get married, and depending on your circumstances, you will stay a housewife, you will get a job, probably, menial jobs here and there. And that means you start having your children when you're that young. You don't have the exposure. It is the patriarchy calling the shots within your house. Even women will definitely have ideas that they will go to an M-Pesa shop and get M-Pesa sent to their husband's phone, and then they have to pick that money. I have been in that scenario. I earned my first salary for 6 months through my husband's bank account because I did not have an ID. So we have a good percentage of women that are still sailing in that boat. So if these women are left where they are, then we are certainly not going to see the numbers. So those are the same women that will follow the clan directive on who to vote. They will follow the husband's or the brother-in-law or the father-in-law's directive on who to vote, because that is how they have been conditioned. That is how they have been nurtured. So then we also have a percentage of women who, in their thinking, leadership is masculine. Because you need to be strong, you need to have a strong voice, you need to protect. And so those are the women that will still stick to, the male candidates. But I'm glad I come from a county that has met the 2/3 gender rule through the ballot for National Assembly. We have 3 women elected as members of parliament. So our county has shown direction. We keep mentoring other women leaders across different counties to see that as an example and say, you know what, it can be done. But also, I'm very keen and very careful that as we are saying that we can lead, the other thing that we must do is not pretend that we have acquired the masculine properties or masculine characteristics so that we can be elected. Soft power still works. I can tell you that soft power will still work. The way that you sell your agenda, when you are in one-on-one conversations, we may not be able to heckle and carry people to places where they will show might, or we will show might. But when we make our inroads in the polling stations and in the villages and in the wards, then the people will have time to listen. Because when you're going to rallies, when you're on the street, people will rarely listen. All they want to hear is, okay, how much money do you have? How much are you going to give us? Can you dance? So those are things that we do appropriately to show them that we are with them, that we can, we are religious, that we know how to mingle, culturally and socially. But when we campaign, then we prove to them by giving them our scorecard. You have more time with people. You can penetrate people more when you visit and you do one-on-one. So that is how I'm suggesting a way forward for the women who don't want to vote other women. Of course, the other thing that I must call out as a responsible woman is the women who have been elected presently, and the first thing that they do is to close the door on other women. So every working day or every chance they get, they are closing a door. If there's a chance to bring other women on board, they are not there. If there's a chance to remove a woman from a seat, they are there. If there's a chance to decampaign a woman from anything, they will be there, number one. So it means that they are giving room for even the men to see that these women cannot work together. And then the men get a chance to say, oh, women are their own enemies. You see, that thing is not there. But when they see the way women in power function and operate against other women, then they say, okay, you see, even if we give them power, they will just keep fighting. And so it means that we must all band together. I don't have to like you for us to work together. But if you push me to a corner and I see that clearly you are trying to lock me out of space that I should be in, then I will come out fighting. So there are those dynamics that are really fighting us. And then at the end of the day, we will lose, all of us, because people will say, wachana na wanawake. Wanawake wanapenda kupigana. So when we put them there, they will bring their moods into parliament, they will bring their moods into the Council of Governors. But no, it's fighting for political space. And women can be vicious fighters. They can be vicious fighters. So we bring all that personality out in when we are fighting women for other seats, then it sends a wrong signal, to the other gender that we need to rope in. Very different dynamics, very diverse, but we need to pick what works. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that analogy. Now, as I bring in Elog, we look at the questions. So there are a number of things that have been mentioned by the panelists here that would require, maybe because you're the observer group here, maybe you can highlight, for instance, whether in your observations for this voter registration and past elections, whether the issue of PWDs in polling stations, is it something that IBC looks into in terms of ensuring that they are well facilitated to ensure that they participate in elections? And then on the issue of violence, which is something we don't foresee it going away in the next election, there is this thing of the Electoral Code of Conduct. In your observation, the Electoral Code of Conduct that is usually released by IBC is supposed to ensure that political parties align to a particular way of operation that will ensure that violence and all manner of electoral-related issues do not come about. Is this something, I know violence has been occurring in the by-elections that have been there since 2017. Is this something that is not well enforced by IBC? How should we go about it? Marcus.
Thank you very much, Sophie, and for even the discussion that we are having here. But before I come to that, I wanted to comment on the registration of the persons with the disability and also link it up with the question you've asked. And I've posted something on the chat. I hope everyone has seen it, that in 2017, we were not able to determine the registration rate of persons with a disability. Neither were we able to determine the ratio because of one major problem, that we never had records from the National Council of Persons with Disability. That was a major issue we had last time, and I think perhaps as part of accountability issue, we may need to ask the Commission to tell us how different this process would be. So we were not able to speak to the registration rate because we need to understand, first of all, how many persons are living with a disability, number one. Do they have unique identifiers in the register as well? That again, that question was never answered in 2017. So it was I just needed to bring that out, that we were not able to do it when we did audit the register in 2017. We are having discussions with a number of actors, including the IEBC, to be able to determine the registration rate of persons living with a disability. But now moving to the question that has been asked about the PWDs in terms of their participation in the process. ILOG, unfortunately, as you already know, we have observers in most of the polling stations that we work in. But as Jane has pointed out, some of these registration centers and voting stations are not PWD friendly. You find, like the instance where she's given example, there were many of such instances where a center is upstairs and someone is having physical disability. You have someone, there are no braille, someone who needs a guide, all those kind of issues are not factored in the registration of some of these in some of these registration centers. And IBC told us that part of the problem they have is finances, and they're relying on public buildings to be able to carry out some of these undertakings. However, that is no excuse. Even public buildings should should be cognizant of the fact that there's needs to have places that are accessible to persons with disability. So it is an area that the Commission will have to continue improving on. It is an area that will require efforts and lobbying and advocacy so that every Kenyan, regardless of their disability status, are allowed to participate in that process. Now, the other issue that I wanted to speak to is the issue to do with please, I want to refer everyone to the chart that I've noted there. Perhaps they can guide the discussions. But on the issue of the code of conduct, the election code of conduct, the IEBC is the body that is supposed to ensure compliance. But how do you ensure compliance when you have got no powers to prosecute? You have no powers to prosecute. Towards that area, towards that time, IBC is busy with over 53,000 polling stations that they want to manage. There are over 10,000 candidates that are trying to vie. There are other logistical issues and trainings going on. IBC is overwhelmed at some point to be able to undertake some of this work. However, as ELOG, we have noted open violence, disregard of by a number of bodies in terms of this code of conduct that these guys are signed and promised to adhere to. So we have noted, as it were, a complete disregard, not only by candidates and political parties to adhere to the code of conduct, but also there is some disappointment from the Commission, which is not usually intentional, like I've said, because of the lack of mechanisms to ensure adherence on the same. But the question we need to ask ourselves, to what extent are we able to provide the Commission with necessary skills and tools to be able to ensure adherence? But we have proposed as ELO that is it time to consider removing the power to enforce the code of conduct from the Commission and vest it in another body. So the Commission is primarily left to conduct the election. Remember, from party primaries all the way to the 9th of August, the diary of the Commission is full. They want to conduct party primaries. Some parties will be asking them to conduct the party primaries on their behalf. There is a dispute resolution hearing by the Dispute Resolution Committee of the IEBC. There is a publication of those names. There is vetting of those names. There is the printing of the ballot papers. There is training and other logistical issues. So the diary of the Commission is full. And then you also want them to enforce the code of conduct to over 10,000 candidates spread across the country. So sometimes the work of IBC is too much full, a lot of it, as it were, that allows it not to be able to conduct its affairs successfully. So perhaps maybe as a country, we may need to relook at the proposal, whether we can remove a number of critical functions, like hearing petitions from party primaries. Should we put it squarely and primarily on the Dispute Resolution Committee, PPDT, or things like that? So I would say that, Sophie. Over to you.
Thank you, Marcus. Those are interesting statistics. So there are institutions that are failing, and there are others that are not well resourced to undertake their very broad mandates. Now, to bring in Raya, there is according to some of the statistics that we've seen from KNBS and even the work we've been doing in the coastal region, we have seen that some of the factors that affect elections is the issue of lack of IDs for persons in the coastal region. And then there is the issue of illiteracy. Is it still a factor for that area? As kama wewe vile umetangamana na hao watu wa Lamu na coast. Illiteracy, is it something that will affect the turnout in the next general elections? Has there been improvements?
Okay, asante Sophie. Sasa hivi mambo yamebadilika, si issue ya illiteracy, lakini voter apathy iko nyingi sana hivi sasa, kwa sababu ni watu ni kama hawana tena imani ya kupiga kura, kwa sababu yale maamuzi ambao wao wanaenda wakipiga kura sio yale ambayo huwa wanapata, kwa sababu tumeona wakati wa nyuma kama kura hii ilivyoisha, hata ikabidi nchi kura iregelewe kwa sababu haikuwa free and fair. So watu wengi wamevunjika moyo kwa sababu wanasema wale ambao wana maamuzi ya kura zao si wao kama wapigaji, ni wale wanaohisabu, kumaanisha commission ambayo inahudumia mambo ya kupiga kura. Kwa hivyo wengi wamevunjika moyo, ni kama hawataki, kwa sababu wanaenda kwa vituo, wanachagua watu, lakini wanaopata ni watu wengine ambao ni vifaranga vya kompyuta. Hilo ni moja. Lingine ni, umeniuliza swali gani lingine Sophie? Voter apathy.
Nimeuliza kama literacy, kama illiteracy ni kitu ina affect kura ya watu wa coast.
Hivi sasa hai affect, na issue ya vitambulisho, kuna baadhi ya wengi ambao walikuwa hawana vitambulisho, lakini hivi sasa pia kuna vitambulisho vingi ambavyo vimeletwa hapa Lamu. Hata sisi kama viongozi mashinani tumeambiwa tuwatangazie watu waende kwa ofisi za machifu kwenda kuchukua, na pia hivi sasa kuna exercise ya RRI 100 days ya kutengenezea mwananchi mashinani vitambulisho. Siku 100 zijazo, ambayo imeanza kama wiki 2 hivi, serikali iko chini huko inafuata kila mwananchi alipo kumtengezea kitambulisho. Kwa hivyo kwa upande wa vitambulisho naweza kusema kidogo imepungua, na kwa upande wa illiteracy hivi sasa hakuna, japokuwa ni wale ambao wanazo kadi za kura ama vitambulisho wamevunjika moyo kushiriki kwenye masuala ya kura kwa sababu ya zile irregularities zinazotokea wakati mtu anapopiga kura. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we focus on some questions that have been asked. Ms. Nerea, Honorable Nerea, you've been asked whether you think that by Claire Lugani has asked, how independent is the IEBC?
Oh, yeah, I think it's one of those questions where you say it's a trap, eh? I can say very confidently, and from somebody who has suffered the lack of IEBC independence for a long time, I do not believe that IEBC is independent, as it were. Because IEBC definitely has they have an appointing authority. IEBC has diverse rules and regulations that they must follow. And for me, I look at, what IEBC has done previously. They have demonstrated that, there are questions as to the process. So it means that if I did not see independence for example, in 2017, when we had the victorious court outcome about the IEBC conduct of the electoral process, then I say that, during that time, IEBC was not independent. And you can see that clearly, even from from the political divide, we started calling on IEBC teams, to be disbanded, IEBC to be reconstituted. And because we felt that they did not deliver 100%, foolproof electoral process. And so now I will say that I have a little bit more, confidence because they have been newly constituted. And so this is the first test for IEBC. I've looked at the numbers in terms of the targets for all regions. By the time you are done with the voter registration, this enhanced voter registration drive, I would like to see how the numbers look like. The other thing I'm closely watching is the performance of the BVR kits, because that will tell us how serious IEBC is and how independent they are and how fair they are. When I give you an example, in one of the wards in my constituency, we have 3 kits. As of yesterday and, the 10th, as of 14th, actually, we had one that was not functional. So when you go to the next ward, you find that, one is not doing, is not optimally functioning. The other one, is now becomes overwhelmed. And maybe that is the reason why people are waiting until towards the end. I don't know. I'm always suspected to be one of the people who think that, IBC sometimes, skews, their operations, against one political divide. I'm hopeful for one thing though, this time around. Looking at their performance, looking at how they have started off, I will wait until we finish for me to come back with my, own individual and informed opinion on whether or not their level of independence has improved, because last time I gave them just under 40%. So I'll wait and see how they perform this time around before we even get to next year. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. There is a concern here from Jane Wanjiku. She says, Jane Wanjiku from Bulapesa, Isiolo North. She's an aspirant. She indicates that there is lower turnout of voter registration for youth because of lack of IDs. So she's asking, where do we start to begin to push for issuance of IDs? So we've heard from Lamu that there is a move from the administration to ensure that there is rapid response initiative towards IDs. Where do we start pushing for IDs?
Can I make a comment on the ID issue, because it keeps coming up, and I think when we are in an electoral season, the issue of ID is only tied to the voting process, and I think that is where we miss the young people, because everybody knows that we have young people that qualified to go to colleges, young people went to universities. All these young people acquired IDs for purposes of accessing, loans, for purposes of accessing, government offices so that they can get served. So we know we have a huge cohort of young people that are just sitting on their IDs waiting to be mobilized. And that's why IBC is making steps to get to these colleges so that they have the BVR kits. Then they are free this time around to identify their area that they would like to register at. So that is number one. Number two, the ones who do not have IDs, what seems to be the problem? Because sometimes we have young people who are around the border areas who are told that you have to go back to your village so that you are identified properly because you might be a foreigner. Those ones can happen. Then number two, we now have national government officers that are not professionally administering their mandate of supporting the young people, because they need the chiefs to sign off on the forms, then for them to be able to acquire IDs in good time. And I know that the provincial administration now have a target. I think it's less than 2 weeks for IDs to be able to be issued. So I think that when we communicate why we need IDs, even before we get to the voting, we are going to have young people take these IDs because it's a matter of public record. Number two, you need it if you need to get a bursary, if you need to get a scholarship, if you need to get help, if you are going to college, you must register as long as you're over 18 years. If you need to have an M-Pesa account, you will need to have an ID. If you need to open a bank account, you will need to have an ID. So when we are mobilizing our young people, let's not just focus on chukua ID, chukua kura, because that alone, some of the young people do not even identify with the reasons why people vote in the first place. They need to be educated. They are not yet eloquent on the voting language. So we need to first get them on some platform, then now train them and say, when you become an adult, part of your democratic right is to determine who leads you, who is in charge of resources that affect your day-to-day lifestyle. And therefore, we move it as a notch higher. But I think sometimes we miss it and just talk about ID Kura. I think even politicians, we could be guilty, of just driving people ID to voting, but there are so many services that a young person needs to have an ID to be able to access. So that is something that I was, when I spoke to one of my greatest political mentors, Mama Ida Odinga, she brought up and said, when you guys are mobilizing, make sure that your communication is right. You're not giving full information. You're only looking at what it's you as somebody who's looking to vie in a political office. Be fair to our young people. And it's not just the young people that are getting IDs. As I said before, we have women who are long married and did not acquire IDs. We have people who lost their IDs and have not replaced, and they had not registered to be voters. So there are different cohorts of people in this ID debate. And as I said, the reason why we are struggling as a country and as leaders is because we do not have sufficient data that can tell us where is this person. So if we move towards, that universal ID that is acquired at birth, and everybody gets into the government system at birth, we'll be able to know when they hit 18, did they finish high school? Where are they? Are they in university? What do they need? It is going to help the government plan services better. So it's not just about voting. It's about government being responsible for planning, being responsible for implementation and delivering services that we are not doing optimally because of the way we structure our communication system and our public services. I mean, that's my biggest issue about ID. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I think we should bring in Jane. Jane, I hope you're online. Marcus spoke about the disconnect between the National Council of Persons with Disability in terms of providing the requisite data so that it can guide the IBC in terms of preparing for elections for persons with disability in different locations in the country. Is there something we can do or your institution can do to ensure that this is not an issue that comes up in the coming year?
First, Sophie, I don't know why IBC could not provide that data 2017, because I personally took an initiative. For the first time, I registered as a voter. Why? Because I wanted to see how they are going to capture my information, my data, including my needs. And that was well done. I stated my disability. This is what I would maybe require during voting period. And I'm sure everybody else who has a disability did that, and the few who registered. So at least they ought to have a number, even if it was small, to say we have this number of persons with disabilities, but we believe they are more than this. So again, to the National Council, yes, that is true. They have not only to IBC or to ELOG, they have failed numerous times to produce accurate data. And the registration, despite that they are government agencies that are required to register persons with disabilities, have been really slow. Why? Because also of bureaucracy. Information is not well dispersed to our people. But moving forward, 2022, we want to see that happening. It's only 2019 we did national census. And so Kenya National Bureau of Statistics should have, although they didn't also have the clear data, but we were able to sit and clarify that, because they gave 0.9 as the population of persons with disabilities in Kenya, which is quite low. But we repeated that and we told them that that was not right, and maybe because of the way the questions were being asked by then. So we want to see a scenario where now National Council and the Bureau of Statistics have sat together to harmonize that. And maybe IBC now should go also an extra mile and validate their data well when it comes to those who are registering as persons with disabilities. Because if I'm registered and I'm just confirming that I'm there and my data were captured, then I have no more than to leave it to IBC really to give that data to any other body that requires that.
Thank you, Jane. As we wind up, there is the issue of someone is asking, Jane is asking still on the matter of IDs. So why is this ID situation an issue in 2021 and it was an issue in previous elections? Why can't we have a solution for this? Maybe I can pose it to Marcus as you log off. Maybe you can answer that. And why? I know the issue of identification cards is something that is streamlined under the Registrar of Persons. However, can this service be decentralized to the Huduma centers in Kenya? Because it's also equally a government facility.
Sophie.
Marcus, yes.
Yes. Will you repeat the question?
So the issue of IDs is a teething issue in 2021, and it has been an issue in previous elections. Why is it so? Is it by design? And also, there's a question on why this service of has not been centralized to the Huduma centers, even though it's under the purview of the Registrar of Persons. It can be a devolved service so that all these persons who complain about not getting their IDs is something that is solved.
All right. I think let me begin by saying that as ELOG, we have been pushing for synchronized database, as spoken by Nerea earlier on, that there is need to have a synchronized system of registration, which then would sort out all these problems that we are seeing currently. Number two, the issue of IDs, and I've put it in my, I've typed it there. The government promised that they'll be able to issue those IDs within 7 days. So perhaps part of the things we need to do moving forward is to push the government and hold it accountable to its promise and ensure that the IDs are issued within the timelines they had provided for. So you apply today, within 7 days, you're able to get your ID. The other thing I would like to say that I don't think it's the issue by design. I think sometimes the issue is the National Registration Bureau is a body that is mandated to ensure that we register persons. However, the challenge for me has been, as ELOG, the need for us to push, really, to let us all push that we have synchronized systems. Those synchronized systems will allow us to avoid all these problems we are seeing, you know, whether there is a Huduma center or not a Huduma center. I think moving forward, this is something that, and in our last meeting with the NRBs, and they told us that it is something that they are pushed, but they're not getting resources for. There is lack of political good political will to be able to put it into place. So there's need for us to move with speed to ensure that guys not only collect their IDs, but also move with speed to ensure that people work very hard and register as voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. As we wind up, I'll give an opportunity to Brian. You can give your concluding remarks. Then Marcus can do his concluding remarks as he logs off.
Okay. I think first I take this wonderful opportunity to thank FIDA and all the participants that have taken part in this Zoom session. And I urge my fellow Kenyans, especially the women and the youth, to come out and register in large numbers, and also make sure to actively participate in the coming 2022 general election. Thank you very much.
Marcus, over to you.
Sophie, let me say this, that in Kenya, the right to register to vote is optional. You may choose to vote or not to vote. It's a right that is you may choose to exercise it or not exercise it. In other countries like Australia, voting is mandatory. and there are penalties if you fail to vote. And therefore, the pressure to register is quite high because it's an obligation that must be met by every citizen. So maybe as a country, we may need to ask ourselves whether we may need to legislate and ask everyone to vote. Perhaps that could be another way, maybe. But the other issue we need to address, Sophie, is the question of voter apathy. Voter apathy, because that is a major problem. Does the vote really count at the end of the day? Because apart from as you see right now, there are political players trying to bribe potential voters to go and register. There is mass voter transfers we see around here. But the question is that ultimately, when I vote, does my vote count? If I put a leader like, let's say, Nerea here, who is an aspirant there, will she be the same Nerea right now, or will she change when she gets into office? So you see, the vote must translate into something tangible, something that speaks to the needs of the person who has voted. So until we address the leadership problem that we have in the country, most Kenyans will not vote. This youth we see around here, part of their reluctance is that they don't see any effect, any substantial change in their lives, whether they vote. They wake up at 4 in the morning, then 5 years, nothing has changed. In fact, they have even become worse than before they voted. So we need to address those two. I think there are 3 issues. The issue of voter apathy must be addressed. The root cause of voter apathy must be addressed, including bad leadership. Number 2, the issue to do with synchronizing our registration and database is important, because that also helps us. And the third one and the last one is whether it's time for Kenya to consider making the right to vote mandatory. Perhaps that could be the other thing. And lastly, as I conclude, that perhaps we use this occasion to call on the IEBC and other political actors to work towards ensuring that their trust levels are very high. Like I've already told you, we did some research. The trust level of IBC is at that 9%. And chances are that it might even go down as we move forward. So maybe we need to work towards ensuring that the trust levels are high. The police is the worst, I think, at 37%, IBC at 9%, NCIC, which is supposed to regulate the issue through the fake news and hate speech, is also below 40%. So maybe we need to work towards ensuring that we improve the trust levels of these institutions, and therefore perhaps even urge, and maybe that would also go along in addressing the issue to do with voter apathy. Thank you very much, Sophie.
Thank you, Marcus. Now I give the opportunity to Jane. Jane, you can give your conclusions. Then Honorable Nerea. Jane, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. My plea is to all of us, let's try to be inclusive, ensure that we don't leave anyone behind, because once we do that, then I don't think we'll be aiming to be democracy when a section of citizen is left out. So ELOG, maybe you could be having some funds maybe to do civic education, ensure that there are some women with disabilities being represented. To Honorable Nerab, maybe also you could think of how you could hold a hand of a woman with a disability during your campaign, because I'm sure you will be seeking for re-election again. How do we include everyone? How do we ensure even those who have no muscles, and especially finances to be able to do campaign, that we support them in no matter what way that we could be able to support them. On the issues of ID, I think I once worked with a registration bureau, and I saw the problem that were there. People are registered, they lost that small waiting card. The states lost, and then one does not know where to start, how to get the ID, because you have to have that small card that you are given, because it has the serial number, and that is the number that produces the ID at the station that you registered. Really, let's because there are so many issues, as Mheshimiwa was saying, that it's not because the bureau is not registering people. Maybe we lost IDs, we are just reluctant, we don't want to go. We registered, we have followed up, we cannot get it, and then we stopped at there. So really, there is much that needs to be understood as to why we are failing in the issue of ID card issuance. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Nerea?
Yes, thank you. I just want to, say three things very briefly. Number one, it's a constitutional right for everybody to take part in the voting process. And if you do not vote, then it's very clear that you are voting for that person that will not serve you. I mean, that's classic. It said that people who don't vote vote in bad leaders, and I think it's true. Many people ignore the party primaries, saying they'll only vote in the general elections, but the party primaries will be, skewed against the competent people that they want. So you better take part in, in all political processes. It is a right and not a favor. And number two, we seem as a country to be able to outsourcing the mobilization for ID and voter registration to the politicians. And I think everybody feels that the politicians are the ones who have more to gain or lose when people acquire voters' cards. And that, for me, is where we lose it. It's supposed to be a responsibility of every parent, in their home, to ensure that there are young people who have attained the age of majority, the women that they married before they got IDs, have acquired IDs, and then take part in the democratic processes. It just doesn't end there. It's very important also because chances are people who don't take part in these processes also don't take part in the census. It therefore means that even where you are, you'll not have resources allocated to you to be able to serve you better. So all these processes are intertwined. And I think the third thing is, as we look towards the elections coming next year, my rallying call is to the political parties. Work with the numbers that you can deliver so that you have a balance of leadership for both genders. So, and that will be a start. Anywhere else is a start. And of course, we are looking forward to having a new progressive parliament that will look at the 2/3 gender rule once again, if the political parties do not manage. And as a practitioner of activism in matters gender and equality, I will not shy away from saying that I care very much about SDG number 5, equality for everybody. It doesn't mean that we are similar to the male gender. It means that we have equal access to opportunities. And so I will not stop fighting for those opportunities until the time when I see that we have made progressive steps. I wish Kenyans a safe electoral process, but I also want to urge the women, vote a dada. I'm urging the men, vote your dada, so that we can balance power and leadership, and we can serve you better because we have a mix of ideas. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear panelists. We are coming to an end of this webinar. Thank you for animating the webinar with your brilliant ideas. Like the Honorable Nerea said, when you don't vote, that's when you vote bad leaders. Now, as we conclude, the proposal to make voting mandatory, although it would breach on some of the rights that we have and upheld in the Constitution, it's something of consideration. We need to move this country forward. The issues that we've been speaking about that need to be actualized by our elected leaders is something that we as Kenyans, as youth, persons with disability, women in the mashinani, we need to go there and actively participate in voting good leaders, and also in voting a dada. and for the men in voting for your dada. With that, thank you, our online participants. Thank you, our panelists. I thank our sign language interpreter that is on the top corner, Yula Nzale. Thank you for being part of this series. And everyone who contributed to ensuring that this process, this webinar comes to fruition. Thank you and God bless you. With that, kwaherini. See you in other forums.